Firstly, I guess I thought I'd take the chance to thank the FSC for giving LADUCA and our community of underwriting and claim staff the opportunity to do these sessions. I believe this is our 5th year at conference, and we've covered some pretty useful topics. And it's good to see a number of familiar faces and repeat offenders over the last few years. But also it's good to see people from other areas of insurance, such as distribution, finance, financial advice, and other parties that may have a vested interest in what we're going to talk about today, which is very important. So we gave over lunch to address a critical issue that touches the lives of many New Zealanders, and in case you can't see, it's moved slides. It's all about mental health, which has been a bit of a difficult one for us as providers to quantify risk on. So in recent years, there's been a growing recognition of the importance of mental health, yet significant challenges persist. Consumers of mental health services in New Zealand often face a labyrinth of obstacles. Access to timely and accurate care can be inconsistent, and stigma remains a barrier to seeking help. And that's especially, I guess, important when it comes to insurance, disability products, health insurance, and disclosure. Many individuals struggle with long wait times, insufficient support, and a lack of resources tailored to their specific needs. But on the other side, insurers face their own set of difficulties. Balancing the need for comprehensive coverage with financial sustainability is a complex task. Insurers must navigate the evolving landscape of mental health treatment and strive to provide support that is both effective and equitable. And today we will hope to explore that and explore some of the challenges in depth and discuss potential pathways that we can come up with in order to improve the mental health landscape, both in the consumer sector and for us as insurers. So I'm joined by two very distinguished speakers and SMEs in their own field, and I'll get them to introduce themselves. But for many of you, you'll be familiar with some of the faces up here. So I'll get first Kathie and Shaun to introduce themselves and a little bit of background as to what their roles are. So I think we'll start with Kathie.
Hello, my name is Kathie Tutty, and I am the Chief Underwriter at Asteron Life. I've been in the insurance industry for about 28 years, and the majority of that time has been in underwriting. I have a passion for getting New Zealanders covered for insurance. I have my own experience with that. My husband was diagnosed with MS about 20 years ago, so I know the importance of having insurance, and especially for when you really need it.
Thanks, Kathie. Hello, I'm Shaun Robinson, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Mental Health Foundation. I have a lot of skin in the game of mental health. I live with bipolar disorder, and so I'm very passionate about the things that the Mental Health Foundation does, and about improving the mental health and well-being of all people in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And essentially what we do at the foundation is we kind of address three things, and they are actually the three pillars of good mental health for individuals, for communities, for businesses, for societies. So we work at empowering people to have the skills, the motivation, the understand the sort of actions that you can all take, that we can all take to grow our well-being, our resilience, and our sort of positive mental health. We try to support people to have the confidence and the skills to be able to support each other, to have those kind of supportive conversations when people are going through a tough time. And then the third thing we do is that we respectfully keep up continual hassling of the powers that be to try and improve the services, the structures, the social conditions that impact on mental health. And it's really those three things that create strong mental health. It's addressing the things that do damage to our mental health, it's building the things that strengthen our mental health, and it's having the support, both informal and services, for people in the times when they struggle.
Thanks, Shaun and Kathie. Perfect. So I thought we would get straight into it with some questions. And those that are underwriters in the room have probably been on one side of the phone and trying to explain this and rationale this to advisors and clients. But my first question, Kathie, would be that consumers in watchdog groups, they often perceive the insurance industry as unfair, especially against those that have mental health conditions. I'm wondering if you can explain why we as insurers often include exclusions, deferrals, and other terms and policies for such conditions, and what do you think are the key factors from an underwriting perspective that influence those decisions?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Well, insurance is all about paying claims. That's why we're here, that's what we do. But we have to find that balance to have sustainability in our business and our products. So we have to balance risk with fairness to our consumers. When it comes to mental health, there are various anxiety disorders, there are various depressive disorders. The course of mental illness is not straightforward. You have varying symptoms from mild and acute that you can recover from quickly. You have conditions that are chronic and more severe, sometimes needing hospitalisation and psychiatric care. So the role of the underwriter in this complex situation, they have to take into account the type of condition that they're underwriting, and sometimes a blanket exclusion is required. This can be something that consumers and consumer watchdogs do find unfair, but it is necessary to balance that risk for all consumers.
Which is a perfect segue to my next question that I was actually going to ask you, Shaun. I'm sure you've got quite a lot to say about this subject, but it does seem that from a consumer perspective that insurers do go at mental health with a sledgehammer and apply very, very broad terms. So given that, I guess, mental health is complex and varies very, very widely, do you think that the insurance industry is oversimplifying its attitudes towards mental health? We're not asking enough poignant questions at application time. What is your view on insurance and mental health?
Yeah, thanks. Look, I understand the necessities of the industry and the need to manage risk when underwriting. I think the key to it is actually having a sophisticated and nuanced and robust understanding of that risk. And I do think that our general societal understanding of mental health is very much a deficit illness model. It's this notion that, mental health, actually, if I say mental health, most of you will immediately think mental illness because we automatically have a negative bias around mental health. Whereas if I said, we have supporters at the Mental Health Foundation who say, I support the Mental Health Foundation because I had mental health last year. Actually, what they mean is they went through a time of mental distress. You wouldn't say I had physical health last year, meaning I was unwell, but we tend to have a very negative bias around mental health. And this is a very long-winded answer, Chris, but I'll get there. Because I do think it is the understanding of mental health that is fundamental to this. So, the traditional understanding is people become mentally unwell, and that's the scary thing that we don't really understand, and we don't like it, and it freaks us out. And they need doctors and nurses and pills and prescriptions to somehow manage those scary things. And what's the other end of that? Well, we don't actually have much of a definition of what positive mental health is. It's just, controlling those scary symptoms. Now, that's not actually a very robust or nuanced view of what it means to be human and experience the ups and downs of our emotions and our thought processes and our mental health. And so over the last 30 or more years, there's been growing science around really looking at a more nuanced view of mental health that looks at notions of flourishing and languishing. Flourishing being that positive state of being engaged with your community, having resilience, being able to sort of bounce back from tough times, having good self-esteem, having sort of goals, and languishing is perhaps not being, clinically unwell, but really the opposite of that flourishing. So generally not very engaged, not having a strong sense of self-esteem. And if you sort of put that axis with the other axis of unwell and not unwell, you have a much more nuanced view of people's experience. And people can move around within that sort of quadrant. So sort of to cut to the punchline for you as insurers, I think the key thing is that most mental health is actually not about becoming unwell. You don't catch it like you catch COVID. It's actually the majority of mental distress is about things that happen to you in your life and the resources, the support, the skills that you have to deal with those things. And even when you have something like bipolar, which I have, it is very much around the resources, the skills, the support that I have that allows me to manage that mental health. I think this kind of notion that someone once had a prescription for antidepressants and therefore they must be excluded, is a very simplistic notion. People recover, people manage their mental health regardless of having times of unwellness that might be related to grief, that might be related to postnatal issues, it might be related to health issues, it might be related to losing your job, it might be related to age. All kinds of things contribute to that life course that impacts on mental health. So I guess my biggest plea to the industry is to take a much more nuanced and rigorous look at risk.
Excellent answer. And you mentioned there that whenever someone brings up mental health or mental illness, the first thing that comes to mind is a negativity around it. And I think that also feeds into, I guess, one of the problems that we have in our industry and in the insurance industry about whether people or our applicants feel comfortable enough to disclose these things to us. And I guess there's a non-disclosure element to it, and there's a element to the fact that mental health is still, even though it seems like the stigma has reduced, and maybe you've got a different opinion to that, is that when people are filling out applications, they're simply not comfortable with telling insurers about their mental health. So I think I'll segue and ask Kathie a question about that. And it'll be around about mental health disclosure and anti-selection or mental health disclosure and non-disclosure. Are we seeing from an underwriting perspective quite a lot of non-disclosure, especially when we're going for PMARs around mental health? And do you think that the attitude towards applicants filling out applications and the hesitancy to disclose these things as a result of that?
Actually, I don't think it is, because I think there's been a lot of improvement. The stigma of mental health is not as it was 10, 15 years ago. what's been happening, especially over the last 5 or 6 years, is you have people coming out like Mike King and the Gumboot Foundation. You have John Kerwin, who's an advocate for mental health. There's been a recent TV program called Match Fit, which is rugby players and league players coming together to get healthy and talking about mental health. So I don't believe that consumers are actually under-disclosing now. I think what it is it's up to the industry as a whole to start looking at our questions, making sure we're offering empathetic questions that can be good for consumers so they don't feel that stigma of not being able to disclose. And I think that we as an industry can work harder on that, because we want people to feel comfortable disclosing, because under-disclosing or not disclosing at all is going to cause complications for them at claim time, and we don't want that. We want cover to be available to customers for when they need it.
Cool, excellent. Do you have anything to add about where mental health is at?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know the stats about disclosure or non-disclosure, and I don't know how you would find it out. I would think there is still quite a degree of non-disclosure. And yeah, I mean, one way to think about this is I think the level, mental distress, times of mental distress that might be diagnosable as a period of mental illness are a part of normal human existence. In the mental health inquiry of a couple of years ago, it's a number of stats that some people are shocked at, but I'm certainly not. Number one in 5 people in New Zealand will experience diagnosable mental distress in any 1 year. It's about 1 million people. The Ministry of Health says that, from its figures, say that across people's life course, 50% of the population will experience mental distress. It might be diagnosed as a mental illness. And the longitudinal studies that are happening in New Zealand are showing it's well over 80%. So of the 30-odd people in this room, that means about 24 of you are going to experience a significant mental distress period in your life for one reason or another. So that's the majority of your clients. So if your questions are, meaning that they're going to be discouraged from disclosing because they don't think they're going to get cover, then I think you've got to really think hard about that. And again, it goes to this notion that mental health, you need to get away from this notion that mental health is an illness that a few unfortunate people catch, and therefore we've got to sort of manage that risk, to the notion that it's part of normal human existence to have times of significant mental distress, and how are we going to support customers to have health and life and employment insurance given that reality of human existence.
Cool, and I guess when we're looking at insurance and mental health and some of the claims trends that we have, one of my questions I had for you, Kathie, was, are we our own kind of worst enemy when it comes to mental health, whether it be by product design, especially around disability insurances with to age 65 payment terms, either loose underwriting or perhaps how applications are written? Do you think that we're kind of our own worst enemy when it comes to the long-term claims that we perhaps have when it comes to mental health?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. I think we all realise that, say for example, someone has a back injury that can be chronic. You may be in pain, the client may need surgery, the surgery doesn't work. We do have the risk there of a long-term claimant, which then could lead to a decline in their mental health. I do think, though, we have good claims processes in place to help these customers. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
it was, I guess, around product sustainability and...
Yeah, I think we have to all... The sustainability, especially of income protection, is going to be important, and we just need to work together to make sure that we can keep products affordable and sustainable for New Zealanders. Because if you talk about relaxed underwriting, that's going to increase risk. It's going to cause claims to skyrocket, which is going to cause increase in premiums. And we don't want that. We want to be able to insure New Zealanders, and we want to keep our products affordable.
Cool. Shaun, for you, I think one of the questions I had, I guess, on my mind is, in your view, what is the most pressing change needed in the way that insurers do business? So what most pressing changes are needed in the insurance sector to better support individuals with mental health conditions? And what steps do you think can be taken to immediately begin this change?
Yeah, like I said, I think the fundamental thing would be reframing the risk around mental health issues and mental distress, and then thinking about how you actually insure and underwrite for that risk. And yeah, I'm not a insurance product expert or an underwriter, but you know, if you consider the sort of figures I talked about before, and the fact that the majority of people are going to have episodes of poor mental health. Now, the other thing is that young people have the worst instance of poor mental health of any other part of the community. So again, if we're going to at the moment, it's close to 25% of young people have experienced a significant period of mental distress in the last 12 months. Now, if we're going to penalise that proportion of your future customer base with exclusions, I think, you know, that's quite a challenge for them, but also for you. So again, I can't design your products, I'm not that smart, but you know, sort of thinking about how do you design a product that can cope with the reality of what happens for people's mental health and the scale and scope of mental distress in our community, while at the same time keeping the industry sustainable. I mean, I'm a total realist, and I'm not suggesting that the insurance industry just needs to be the default health funding system for New Zealand. But I do think it is that reframing the industry's understanding of mental health and then designing risk management and products to cope with the reality, not the outdated understandings of mental health. That's where the key lies.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that too. I think we have to be aware of the next generation coming through as an industry. I mean, what's happening now, you've got young children, like you say, young people experiencing a mental health issue. I've got grandchildren that are 11 and 14. They're very aware of their feelings. They talk about their feelings, and they know what anxiety is. I mean, in my day, I certainly didn't know that. And gone are the days now where you say, harden up and get over it. I mean, this generation coming through are very, very savvy, and they know about technology. We as an industry have to keep up with the change and the change that is happening. And how we do that, I think it's going to be up to people and product as well as the changes in underwriting. And I guess I would like to see us as an industry work towards making sure that our policies stay sustainable for this next generation coming up.
And yeah, very, very good points there. And I would go and visit my mum and see my brother who's 17 and in high school, and the amount that the amount of education that they're exposed to, and some of the things that he has told me is a lot different to back in the 90s, where it was kind of you just didn't talk about it. So I am seeing, I guess, a bit of a change and shift in mind. So,
can I just add one little thing to that? I think another part of this is the notion of recovery and management. So, I mean, outside of your industry, I'll give you another example. The police used to have a policy where they would not take anyone in as a trainee into police if they had been on antidepressants any time in the last 5 years. Now, through successful advocacy, they've overturned that, but there were women applying to be officers who had experienced postnatal depression and had a short period, of being on antidepressants, recovered, moved on, managed their mental health very well, but there was a kind of blanket exclusion, for want of a better word. People recover from times of mental distress, and also even with chronic mental health conditions, people manage them. So, I would be excluded, and I wouldn't even bother, fighting it. But I'm in my 5th CEO role. Stressful work. Yes, I have times when my symptoms of bipolar jump up and bite me, but on the whole, my life is characterised by flourishing, not by my mental illness, because I manage my mental illness really well. So I guess the key thing is, how can you incentivise your customers to actually manage that risk and perhaps build products that build that incentivisation into it? So you're kind of actually managing the risk of them not managing their own health. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess we've talked about a lot. We talked a lot about the New Zealand industry and New Zealand insurance industry, especially when it comes to underwriting. But I guess I wanted to take a zoom out of the mouse scroll wheel and ask you about maybe perhaps some international trends or some global trends in underwriting, insurance underwriting for mental health, which perhaps you've seen, and how it compares to New Zealand.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. There's a lot going on the international scene, not just in regards to mental health, but in genetic testing and family history, as we know. There is some countries in the EU that have a policy called the right to be forgotten. And this policy was brought into some of the countries in the EU for cancer survivors. And basically, some countries, if a client has been a cancer survivor with no symptoms for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, depending on what country, they no longer have to disclose their cancer diagnosis. There are talks happening at the moment to perhaps extend this to things like heart attack, and also mental health is in the discussion. It's an interesting thing to be keeping an eye on, but I also think we need to be very careful, because we also need to be able to have the right to underwrite, and we need to be able to still protect the risk and keep our products sustainable and affordable. There's been a recent round table in Australia in regards to mental health and insurance, and that's had the industry experts plus mental health experts discussing this very topic. So I'm looking forward to hearing the learnings that have come out of that round table. But we have to make sure that we don't get railroaded as well as an industry. We have to make sure that we work together, because we don't want to have products that become unaffordable for people. And if we have legislative changes that affect the industry and our ability to provide services and products, then no one's going to benefit from it.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm excited to see whether some of those, some of the initiatives and some of the things that are coming out of Australia, some of the good things actually float into our market, which I think inevitably will. We've talked quite a lot about insurance, and I thought I'd give you a bit of an opportunity, Shaun, just to talk about things beyond underwriting insurance and technicalities, and about the Mental Health Foundation. And as a CEO, where do you think more resources or changes are needed in the mental health and wellbeing sector, or if there's any further things in the public sector or that the government can do to further outcomes for Kiwis when it comes to mental wellbeing, whether it's positive or, as you said, the negative connotation that sometimes goes with it?
Yeah, well, that's a topic I could probably talk on for quite a long time. We have a pretty broken system of responding to mental health in New Zealand, and I think that goes back to a bunch of fundamentals. One is that understanding of mental health, that I think our response has been based very much on that, you're unwell or you're not unwell sort of treatment deficit model, and doesn't take in the kind of full extent of well-being. The other is that, so there's a lack of understanding, and I think that is run right through decision making. Doesn't matter what political brand you're under. Then I think there's also a lack of appreciation of the scale and scope of mental health issues, and again, I think it's been seen as a part of health that some poor unfortunate people catch, rather than a very significant part of human experience that we need to support. So when I've talked to a range of politicians over the years, again of different brands, and kind of said that thing, look, even by your own ministry's stats, you're talking about 1 million people a year who might need services. I can see their eyes sort of go into panic and glaze over. So we've underestimated the scale massively, and therefore we've misunderstood it, we've underestimated the scale, so we've underinvested, and when we have invested, we've invested in the wrong things. So that's not a very pretty picture, really. And I think even with the 1.9 billion that got invested, under the last government, there was a bit of the same there. It was great, and some good things did happen. I don't want to sort of pretend that all of that money was wasted. However, there was not really a well thought out plan or what needed to be done, and a coordinated plan across those three things, across, development of new services, yes, addressing things that prevent mental distress, and also promoting mental well-being. I think we desperately need a plan. We don't have a plan. People are just kind of like throwing money at this service or that service, and without sort of coming together for an overall approach to something which is a fundamental building block of the health and wellness and prosperity of New Zealand. So we don't have a workforce development plan, and so when the last government created a new tier of services at the GP level, and were sort of lauding the fact that, well, we've created this whole new service, well, look closer and 80% of the staff were poached from other parts of the mental health service. So were you really creating a new service? I'm not quite so sure. We need to put those fundamental building blocks in place. We need to accept that we're talking about a kind of 10 to 15 year process of building to something that's actually going to adequately respond to needs, and it absolutely needs to be across those three different components: preventing distress where we can, yes, building up a service infrastructure, but also promoting mental well-being. I call those three things the three legs of a stool. And often when I'm talking to decision makers, they'll go, oh yeah, well, we've got to get the services right and then we'll do the other stuff. It's like, if you tried to build a stool and you only built one leg before you built the other legs, it wouldn't be very effective. So, services need some mates, really. And just to give you an idea of how this can work, we have a program called Farm Strong, which has been running in rural communities for 9 years now. It's not a service. It basically encourages farmers to think about the things that they can do to build up their mental well-being. We don't even call it a mental health program. We say, you're the biggest asset on your farm, you need to maintain that asset. And farmers buy into that sort of thinking. So we get them sort of talking about, taking a break off the farm, about, how to sleep well, about how to stay fit, about how to stay connected to community. We've shown that about 20% of farmers have actually improved their mental well-being as a result. Now, ACC became very interested in this. I do love insurers, and I'll tell you why in a minute, because insurers get prevention. So ACC became very interested in this and funded us to research the link between farmers' well-being and rate of accidents on the farm. Surprise, surprise, there was a positive correlation. If you're in a better mental state, you'll have less accidents and you'll recover faster from injury. So they put that through their actuarial models and said, this is going to save us money, here's some money, make it bigger, and also can you do this for other industries? So we're now starting that work in the residential construction sector. So, that's the sort of well-being stuff that we can do. That is, just on accident prevention alone, that's ACC's calculated they're getting over a 4-to-1 ROI. On their investment in that. So, that's, I guess, where we focus a lot of our attention at the Mental Health Foundation. We're about to come into Mental Health Awareness Week at the end of this month, last week of September. The theme this year is about community and connection to community. And again, last year we were able to show that 2.2 million people across New Zealand actively did something for their well-being as a result of that week. But, it shouldn't just be a week. We really need a farm strong for the whole of New Zealand that's running all the time. So, again, I'm passionate about this because, I've got bipolar, I do take medications, I've been lucky enough to have good health support, but my medications don't make me function well. They don't make me happy and they don't make me flourish. They just help me to control the depression, anxiety and other things that come with bipolar. What makes me well and flourishing is the things I do in my life that actually grow that flourishing. And if you need a bit of science, the reason why that works is because we actually create things like endorphins, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin by doing things. Most of you would know if you do some exercise, you're going to create endorphins in your body. Well, you actually create serotonin by connecting with people, oxytocin by, achieving goals or spending time in nature, etc., etc. So it's our behaviour, our day-to-day habits and lifestyles that help to build little micro doses of those hormones and chemicals that we need for our positive mental health. You don't need to know that, you just need to do it, and it'll work. So I'm super enthusiastic about that, and because I use it to manage my bipolar all the time. The other thing that I'm acutely aware of is that I'm a cisgendered, Pākehā, middle-aged baby boomer, tertiary educated white male. So the entire system was designed for me to succeed. The only thing that was against me was, developing bipolar. So yeah, I didn't have all those things that were doing damage, that do damage to so many people on a day-to-day basis. So that's what we need to do. Bit of a long journey, but things like Farm Strong, things like Mental Health Awareness Week, show it can be done, and we're going to keep on doing them.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Shaun. And yeah, I'm hoping the best of luck to the Mental Health Foundation in trying to push some of those initiatives. I thought I'll give a question to you, Kathie, that might be a little bit more technical, and you might be able to ramble on about this for a while because it's on everyone's. It's a hot topic, and it's around underwriting rules engines in AI.
Yeah.
Great fun. And the magic word data and data trends. So in terms of, mental health disclosure, e-apps, things like that, are we seeing any emerging, any trends that are coming out of what we're seeing coming through the e-app or e-apps or electronic apps and underwriting rules engines when it comes to mental health? And are we seeing, a change in data for paper apps or manual applications?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's a big question. I can't really speak for the whole of the market, but I can speak for the data that we've been seeing over the last 12 months. And when it comes to disclosures for mild to moderate mental health conditions, possibly grief-related, pregnancy-related, we are seeing that with automated underwriting, that these are going straight through without the need for invasive questioning for our clients and without the need for medical information. And this again is based on question sets that are pertinent to the conditions that the person is suffering, plus the empathy that's shown in those questions. However, when you're looking at the more chronic conditions and recurrences, the rules engines are not equipped to adequately underwrite those, so they can't go straight through processing. And so these types of mental illnesses do require an underwriter to look at them, and this is because we want to get the best terms for the client, and so getting their medical information and getting a full picture allows us to get the correct terms for the client. I do think, though, that... so I've lost my train of thought.
Expanding on the UREs and what you were mentioning, because I was about to actually cut across you, so it was probably a good segue.
Oh, that's good. I don't know where my brain was going there.
But it was around the rationale as to why most of the cases where people apply for insurance are diverted straight to a manual assessment approach. Do you envisage a world where we have enough robust data that perhaps even an AI model or automated underwriting might be even more precise than a human approach?
Yeah, that's another good question. I think that the analytical data that we're seeing, and also the use of AI as it gets better, I think you will see that happening. Again, it comes down to the right questioning. It'll come down to the learnings of the automated underwriting process. But I think what will eventually happen is we will see a more individualised, tailored approach to underwriting where we take into account a specific client's conditions, and that's going to make us be able to have more tailored terms to their condition, perhaps stopping the need for blanket exclusions. I don't see it happening for all cases, but there is evidence that this is the way to go forward.
And I think that one of the things as a sector that we should be encouraging, especially as underwriting and claims professionals, should be encouraging more disclosure out of our clients. Often, and I'm speaking entirely anecdotally, we would have people that would say, would not disclose mental health, and I know that I've gone over non-disclosure before, but I think that going back to what Shaun was saying about a large majority of people in this room would have experienced stress in our lives, and I often found myself when filling out my own application, work stress, things could be stressful at home for one way or another, and it might be just a one-off occurrence or it could be a multiple occurrence, but I think it's naive to think that some of the application or the application numbers that we're getting where there's no mental health disclosure, I think it's naive to think that that's an accurate reflection of true disclosure. So I think that's particularly interesting. Before I move to open the floor up to ask any questions, I thought I would open it up to you folk, and maybe perhaps we'll start with Shaun about just wrapping up about what you think, not just the insurance sector, but perhaps financial services sector in general, whether it's banking or even other industries, what we need to do better to come to the table for New Zealand consumers.
Yeah, well, I think I've definitely talked about having a fuller understanding of mental health, and then a fuller understanding of the risks associated with mental health and the life course nature of mental distress, and really design products and all aspects of the interaction with clients appropriately. And just to sort of ground that a little bit, I was just thinking that a few times when I've had to answer questionnaires myself, and I think they probably actually might have been employment questionnaires, and an agency might say, is there any medical condition that might impact on your ability to do the job? And I always go, no. End of story, And I think, because I know that my bipolar does not impact on my ability to do my job. I've got 25 years experience to show it. So, but the person asking that question might well have thought that I have, been dishonest, but I know that I haven't. And I guess that is driving at some of what I'm saying there in that sort of real world situation.
Cool. And to Kathie, I guess I'll ask and I get you to sum up, what do you think the outlook is for mental health underwriting going into the future? Do you have a positive outlook that it's not going to be such a blunt force hammer to mental health in terms of blanket exclusions and things like that? How do you see the future of mental health underwriting?
Oh, that's a tough one, Chris, because at the end of the day, mental illness is still complex, it's still varied, and there isn't a set path that any type of mental health condition can take. But as I touched on before with the underwriting rules engine, and also touching on what was said before, 24 people in this room may have experienced some kind of mental health over the last 12 months. I think it's the same as what Shaun said. When you're filling out an application, you may have had a period of, when you were stressed or you've suffered a reaction to grief or something. Maybe not everybody is disclosing that, and are we worried about those sorts of conditions? I do think, though, with the use of data analytics and AI, as I've said before, I think we will be able to make a more tailored approach to mental illness, but it is still one of our biggest claims, and it is still one of our most difficult claims to manage. So we have to be careful, and we have to make sure, as I've said before, we have sustainability in our products, and we keep making insurance available for all New Zealanders.
Excellent, thank you. So I thought I'd open it up if anyone has any questions. I didn't manage to get the tablet working, which is a bit embarrassing. But if anyone has any questions, we are welcome to put them forward. Hello in the back.
You mentioned that disclosure could increase the amount that you have to pay out, but also on an individual basis it can increase premiums. do you see a future where people are less likely to seek professional help for things like postpartum depression if they know it's going to increase their premiums at a time when cost of living is challenging?
Anyone want to take that one?
I would say yes.
I would also say yes, because it comes down to increased premiums. Something like postnatal depression, for example, it may not necessarily make an increase in someone's premium. Perhaps if they're applying for income protection, the postnatal depression has been recent, then the chance of an exclusion is likely. For other benefits like life cover, not necessarily an increase in premium. So I still think that mental conditions like postnatal depression, grief, we still should be able to be keeping that affordable.
And I think that's also a really good point. I think I might actually ask Shaun your opinion on this as well, because, and this isn't exclusive to insurance, but are you finding, in your, I guess, experience with meeting people with mental health issues or have a mental health history, do you find that there's a barrier to them? They don't want to get help because they're afraid that they will be bounced from an occupation like the police force or applying for insurance, and that obviously leads to some pretty poor outcomes. But do you think that this is still quite a large issue?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the more people face those kind of exclusions and, I hesitate to say, but discriminatory kind of treatment, and I'm not saying that the ability to underwrite is 100% discriminatory, but the more people sort of face those kinds of barriers, you're naturally incentivised not to talk about it. I was not open about my bipolar until I worked for the Mental Health Foundation, and I didn't even fully disclose until I was the preferred candidate, because frankly you do get treated badly if you talk about having a long-term mental health condition. While I do think we've moved a long way in terms of stigma and being able to talk about mental health, I still think there is a lot of stigma. There is a lot of black and white risk management and the attempt to manage things out. What I often say to employers is, if you think you can screen out employees who might at some point have some kind of mental health issue, you're limiting yourself to about 20% of the workforce. So, and forget it, because you've already got at least 20% of your current workforce who will be experiencing that this year. So, I think there is still a lot of that kind of black and white thinking, and there's still a lot of discriminatory behaviour, and frankly, I'm very out about living with bipolar, but I'm still careful in personal situations who I'll disclose to and who I won't, because you get all sorts of weird and wonderful reactions, like the guy I met at a party who said, "Oh, we had one of those in my family. We used to call him our crazy uncle." Ha! And I thought, I wonder what he called you.
I'd just like to add to that, because, if I look at a case and it's somebody that has a mental illness, they suffered from depression, we still look at ways as an insurer and as an underwriter to offer cover wherever we can. We don't say no. We assess the risk, and if we can offer it, yes, we may need to put an exclusion on, but that client still has cover for any other medical condition that they may have or they may suffer in the future. And when we underwrite, we get one opportunity, and that's at application stage. And that person has that cover then, when you're talking about income protection, to age 65 to age 70. So we are doing what we can to make sure that we can cover these people. It's just that sometimes there will be an exclusion for certain conditions.
I mean, again, I'm not a product designer. I do think, I think that's absolutely fair enough. But I think, again, it's about, there are gradations of risk. So probably your worst nightmare in the insurance industry would be someone who becomes chronically mentally unwell and cannot work, for the rest of their life and is drawing income insurance, for multiple years. Is it possible to exclude that but not exclude, short-term income insurance where someone might have an episode where they're experiencing mental unwellness? So, it's like breaking things down and actually looking at the reality of people's mental distress and, kind of ensuring the reality, not ensuring the generalisation.
Excellent.
Yep. We do have those products. We have products that where we offer a 2-year benefit period or a 5-year benefit period. So we do have that part covered as well.
Excellent. And I think we've run slightly over, but I wanted to thank our two panellists here, Shaun and Kathie as well, for an excellent session, and round of applause for them.
Excellent. Cool.